Hi guys, hail and merry meet to everybody. It's Michelle Marie Talani, and today we're going to show you briefly the printer setup. I did originally do it on a fancy setup, but I realized that I made it a little more complicated explaining it than it's worth. So let's try actually showing the printer setup using my phone, because it's more than sufficient for this application. Obviously, it's where I see the cat. So this is the printer, and I'm going to start with the most basic thing. This is a 9-pin dot matrix printer, and it uses what they call tractor feed paper, and I did use it to print my budget sheet for next month. So yes, this is a real budget sheet that I use. I haven't printed one on paper in over 2 years. So this is the current budget for next month. Now, the reason why it's nice to have a printing is that you can go back and look at this, and you can pull little check marks and follow the budget along. Now, these computer printers use what they call parallel ports. That is, it uses a Centronics cable right here. You can see it. But this computer, which is the M1 Mac Mini, only has USB-C. USB. So how do you connect a parallel port printer to a USB computer? Well, you use a converter like this unit right here. Unfortunately, this converter is clearly has been seen better days, but basically there's nothing wrong with the wires. I think it's just standard 4 wires here. It connects to the port back there. And this has got a very common problem I've seen with some of these cables. But it works, okay? So what this does is it converts Centronics parallel. This uses the PC standard DB25 connects to the computer, and then through that computer, and then plugs into USB-C port. In this case, since my monitor has 2 ports on it on the side, you can see one here goes to my braille display, the other one goes to the printer. So makes it simpler to just print it. The driver, I didn't talk much about the driver, the software that is. It's actually built into the Mac. It just works with this printer interface. So because this is a dot matrix and this is an Epson compatible 9-pin, you can use the standard 9-pin Epson printer driver to print it. The thing was, I wanted to be able to print it in ASCII. That is, to use the built-in printer capability instead of using the fancy tools, printing fancy LAD writing. As you can see here, it's pretty. That's the generic font of the printer. Obviously, you can see I put a new ribbon on it, and it just got works pretty good for what it does. The only thing with this printer is, besides the fact that it's made in 1991 and is old, is that it is, fortunately, has not suffered to the point of capacitor plague, where the electrolytic capacitors have gone bad. At least not yet. And maybe they are, maybe the ESR is getting up there, but they're still working as they're intended. Now, unfortunately, the way it's set right now is I cannot print graphical printing like that screen right there on this printer in using the random mode than I can if I use the 9-pin conversion program, raster program to convert digital images like this to the digital images on that. But let me show you what it is like to print on this I was printing when I just printed already for today, which is the budget. Okay, if I go back here and I select the device, notice it's using a script. Okay, so the BC program prints ASCII output, and then it's sending to the line printer, and the device is called ASCII only. And I'm gonna take this cover off so you can see this, how this thing prints. So, as I click the enter key over here, and prints it out on ASCII. And it's not using any kind of digital imagery. It's just printing it out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit offline now. I'm going to hit form feed. Turn back online again. That's so I can line it up for the next page. So the cool thing is, because this paper is continuous feed, you can visualize how long you could print documents on this paper. You could print so many pages of documents and then get them all printed on, let's say you want to print a book, you can print all odd pages first and then print all even pages on the second round, and that would do the job just fine. So that is indeed what happens with this printer. In fact, it so makes it so easy that people forget that these printers are used in commercial businesses and offices for a reason that is very different than the way we use modern computer printers at home. Printers at home use cut sheet paper like this, which is fine if you got a printer that has an excellent cut sheet feeder and feeds paper properly, and it doesn't jam, it doesn't slip, doesn't slop all over the place. But another reason I use these in offices is, let's say you want to send multiple carbonless forms. Okay, many tax statements are printed on such things, the carbonless paper forms used for tax returns. So that I get 1099s, I get 1099 MISC, whatever. Those will actually be printed on carbonless paper. So which means you could print this could do 4 sheets at a time on carbonless. So which means that you can print 4 copies of the one form with the appropriate areas for the forms that needed to be grayed out. For areas that didn't need it, could be printed all at once. Yeah, it's sort of nice. And the cool thing is, like I said, is it's got the ability to print other fonts too. Many of these printers, this one certainly is no exception to the rule, have a control printer mode. Like, for example, you can select program mode, font, and then instead of a program, but you can also manually override it. So let's say, for example, I say I want to print this thing as draft, which it already is set by default, or courier, or prestige, or bold, proportional pitch fonts, or regular proportional pitch font. Right over here you can see it. Okay, and these are different point sizes you can do by default, such as 10, 12, and 17. Proportional pitch font. Then there's something called quiet, which really isn't that quiet. It just basically lets you print things quieter. And this has to do with paper, 11-inch, 12-inch, and 14-inch legal, and also 9.5-inch. I've never seen paper that's 9.5 inches long, but I suppose 8.5 inches. I mean, what would that be? Like taking an 8x11 piece of paper and put it in sideways? Well, would it fit? Yeah, actually, barely. If you left the trapdoors off, you could put it in that way to print things in landscape. Never tried it, but you could try it that way. So, right now the thing is, Rusty's made it clear to me, little speed bump over there, that he would like to have his place back over here. So, I've got to figure out what to do with the printer, because I really would like to have a printer working. So, what's wrong with the laser printer? I didn't talk about that. So let's talk about that. The laser printer has two problems, which I might as well address. Okay? Number one, the first thing the laser problem has is its paper feed mechanism is broken. It constantly slips and doesn't work reliably. That's the big thing. The second thing is the original ability to install the extra 16 megabytes of memory module. That socket got broken, so unfortunately it only has like 2 megabytes of RAM and PostScript, which means guess what? You ain't gonna be out printing much. Okay, I think I had like 20 megabytes when the memory was there. The built-in 4 megabyte, and then the other 16 to bring up to 20 megabytes, which is great for printing big, fancy, complicated documents. But because the memory socket got damaged, you can't put any memory in it. It just doesn't work because the socket's got bent pins. So immediately means that's a nightmare in its own right. That, and another problem is that the firmware has changed on the new toner cartridges, so that they don't work. Even if you buy a brand new one from Lexmark, they will not work because the printer's firmware has changed. That's another thing. Digital rights management is a real sore spot for me. These printers use, modern ones, seem to really decide to go push hard on digital rights management. Back in the 1990s, like this printer, there was no such thing. Ribbons were generic, and they even from Panasonic or from another brand company and making compatible ribbon. There really wasn't that kind of control. It just didn't exist. So people could buy third-party ribbons and supplies almost anywhere. Granted, printer-specific hardware like printer mechanisms and things like that didn't exist, but that did. So, yeah, that's an important point to bring up. Let me put this thing back in my stand here so I can, yeah. So, okay. So should you buy a printer like this? Well, that depends on your application. Do you need just once in a great while printing of something, or do you need to be able to print color and fancy graphics and pictures? And it all depends on your application. I will just say with a straight face, as I said, it depends on your application. Would I buy a brand new printer? We already talked about this before, but I'm bringing it up. Let's look at the choices. The two major classes of raster printers: inkjets and laser. Okay. Inkjet printer. If you don't print a lot of stuff, the ink cartridges clog up. Ink is very expensive. No matter how many ways somebody said that they can give you inexpensive ink, if the print head clogs up, it ain't inexpensive, honey. I'm sorry. Because the truth of the matter is, when the print head clogs up, you now got to declog the damn head. And that's not easy. In fact, it's definitely not easy. So, yeah. The other thing is that printers, the modern sheet feeders are known to slip and jam. And instead of me being able to have a guaranteed way of making sure the paper is properly feeding at all times, like I can with a tractor printer like this one, where the tractor sprockets actually connecting through these holes on the top. So you know the page is properly feeding the whole time. These other printers that use standard bond paper like this depend on the being able to grip the page. And depending on the printer, the paper can either stick together or the rollers and the paper advance may not pick up the paper at all and cause the paper to misfeed. Okay? So it's a different thing depending on your application. Should you consider a dot matrix printer? Well, again, like I said, depends what you're printing. Are you going to be printing a lot of office forms, like where you have multiple carbon sheets to print, carbonless copies to do for different tax purposes? Sure, why not? Are you looking for a printer for printing the most awesome, professionally written postscript documents, like your doctrinal thesis or something like that? Probably not. Maybe a 24 pin for that if you do want to keep with the dot matrix, but it's gonna take you a while. Okay, 24 pin printers, as I said, still making new 9 and 24 pin printers today. So, however, if you do have the existing printer, like this one has been used in my Commodore 64. This has been used on my Linux machines. This has been used with this Mac. Never before have I used it with this Mac. I've used it with my other Mac, but that's sometimes tricky. Because I found in my case, I had to write a custom print driver for it. Because the standard system that would be used with this printer, which the Mac does have, which is the Epson 9-pin compatible driver, is great, but it unfortunately is slow and slower. So, thus, I find that this printer works very well in ASCII, except for on this printer anyway. Now we don't know if it's the printer or the printer interface. Could be both. Where in a lot of Unix machines to print bold space on ASCII printers like this and daisy wheels. I didn't mention daisy wheels, but we'll mention them real quick. Because it's using ASCII, I could plug in a daisy wheel printer in here and it will work the same way. A daisy wheel is a wheel that has all preformed characters on it. And then there's a single hammer that goes bang, 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 bang. And just slaps the character against from the daisy wheel onto through a film or nylon ribbon into the paper, and it prints a character. Daisy wheels are fantastic because they are true letter quality, because they're complete characters, but they are not necessarily very fast. But if you want to go that well, where you really, really, really do print a lot of letters, just get a laser printer, because it's going to be faster and it's not going to wake up the neighborhood thinking that you're shooting off a machine gun at somebody. Okay, I'm not kidding. Daisy wheels are that loud. They sound like you got a big woodpecker sitting in your office. Going boom 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 boom. It's a pretty each line. Whereas this goes it goes peck 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 peck. And as it does that, the wheel is spinning. So there's actually two motions actually going on at once. Oh yeah, plus the print head's moving too, from left to right, right to left, if it's bidirectional. But it certainly is an option. Okay, so do I think this printer is worth it for what I'm using for? For now. Would I get another laser? Yes. Would I buy a color inkjet? No, I'm not interested in inkjets. I absolutely had the worst luck with inkjets. Inkjet printers are crap. For me, anyway. They're just crap because they clog up, the papers don't always feed right, the ink cartridges are special, DRM encoded nightmares, and ink's expensive. So, no, not interested in inkjet. But a new laser, would I get a color laser? Probably not, because again, I don't print a lot of color documents to justify the cost. Now, do they make printers either in laser or inkjets that could use continuous feed paper, like fan fold paper? They do. They actually do make printers that use fan fold and roll paper. These cost a lot of money, and unless you're going to be printing a lot of documents with these, or banners and something like that, maybe your business is a service business, a service bureau, where you're printing graphics like Staples, Print and Copy Center, or Kinko's, or a company like that, where you're going to be printing lots of pages, I would just say, no, don't waste your money. But if you do that, and you can justify it as a business expense, sure, go for it. You ain't got nothing to lose. In fact, it might actually make you happy, because then you can print huge loads of documents and keep people happy. So that's pretty much it. As I said, you can use any printer that can do ASCII with a Mac that uses parallel or serial port. Just like with the parallel port, if you have a printer that uses serial ports or a modem, for example, here's an example of such an interface. This is a serial port. So if your printer uses a serial port, this happens to be a modem for the deaf, which is a TDD modem. They got a serial port connected onto it. And you can set up a printer or a parallel or serial port printer the same way. And it would plug into the back. And you can have your cake and eat it too, literally. Okay. So parallel ports, serial port printers, no problem. Network printing, even with a dumb printer like that, is not a problem. There is multiple ways to do that as well. Jet direct interface, other print spoolers that support Centronics ports can be hooked up to these printers so that they can do the same thing. They get a text job, they send it out from the text job over the Ethernet port to your computer printer that's hooked up in the other end. Only thing you have to do is just set up the appropriate PostScript or network driver, and boom, you're in. So yes, that's another option. So for now, that's a quick, dirty, simple little printer demo. And if you have any questions about printing, I may not know everything in the world about printing, but I could probably give you some guidelines of what I would suggest. based on the different needs, and everybody's needs are different. So the one person that may occasionally print a budget sheet or print a letter, but don't do much else. Either a laser or a dot matrix will work fine. If you do a lot of fancy printing, then a laser is better than an inkjet. If you really, 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 really want to do color, but you don't want to spend a lot of money on a laser, then you can buy an inkjet, but make sure you remember that the inkjet is going to be used constantly, or the print heads are going to clog up and you're going to be cleaning them out. And Epson printers, inkjets are notorious. They have what they call a waste tank. These waste tanks are just like a little septic tank. They actually, when you're cleaning the ink printer, what happens is it's squirting ink into the waste tank to clear the nozzles. So after a while, the system determines how much waste is in the tank and does a hard stop. And only way you can start that up again is bring it to an Epson service center and have them pump the tank out. And that could be a real deal breaker for some people. Other print heads that are all-in-one print heads, like an HP Diskjets. I'm talking about the older ones, not the new ones. The new ones, they say they use individual ink cartridges. So let's just say the old ones, you might find out you ran out of, say, cyan or magenta or yellow, and all of a sudden finding out that instead of refilling the missing color, you got to replace the whole print head, which is really not economically feasible. Most of them, including, have two print heads, one for black, one for color. The Diskjet 500C is one such printer, even though it's way out of date now, but it is a two print head printer, okay? It uses a 25A and a 26. I had one, I know, and it's a pain to deal with. But also, many modern printers are made poorly. They're cheap for a reason. They are trying to get you to buy their ink for their printer, first of all. That's why they're cheap. Second of all, they're cheap because the quality is not in there before the thing goes on. It really doesn't have that quality. But again, if you're just printing an occasionally letter for mom, it probably doesn't matter. You're not going to make a difference to that for your mom. She just wants to see your letter from you, or your homemade greeting card or whatever. No problem. So, as I said, if you have any questions about printing, don't be free to reach out to me. Okay? I'll talk to you later. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.